Hey y'all, Melissa here with you today, and today I'm going to be doing a t-shirt upcycle project. I'm going to show you how I take this and turn it into this. So this type of upcycling project is something I like to do a lot. You can see I'm actually wearing another t-shirt that I did this to, and I'm going to be using my Kirei cami pattern to do this. I've got all the details for that pattern linked below. So I'm going to grab that and then I'm going to show you how I cut this out. So in order to cut out my pattern pieces out of this t-shirt, first I need to be able to lay this t-shirt flat. So this particular one, which I got at a thrift store, has seams up the side that I'm going to cut. If yours doesn't, you can just cut up the sides. You do want to pay attention to if this is twisted, like this one is, and that's very common to find in mass manufactured t-shirts, that they get slightly off grain and twist around once they're washed. But I'm just going to cut right up the seam lines. And I realize this is black and it is difficult to see, but I personally don't believe in sewing projects that I'm not going to wear just for the purposes of this channel. So black is what we're going to get because this is the t-shirt I bought, because it will actually get worn. And I'm going to take that straight through to the sleeve seam. Once I have that done, I can cut out the front and back. And because this has a graphic on it, I want to make sure that I center that on my pattern. So I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm making sure that the edges of my graphic, that I'm actually folding it in the center of the graphic, and that the edges of the graphic are meeting each other. In fact, I'm going to stick a pin through there to check. And I'm actually going to check on the sides as well. Because of the off grain issue, this may or may not be with the actual rest of the shirt folded in half. And you can see, since this shirt was cut off grain, I have extra on one side than I have on the other. So if you're planning to do this, I strongly recommend getting a t-shirt that is bigger than the size you would need. As you can see, I barely have enough fabric to cut that one out. I'm going to cut along the neckline and I'm going to get just to the edge of the sleeve. Because of where the graphic is falling, I actually am going to leave the neckline just slightly higher than the pattern piece, and I just kind of rounded it off. And now I need to cut out the back piece as well. And since I don't have a graphic, I don't have to center the back piece. I do want to make sure I'm on grain and not twisted, however. If you do have a shirt with more cutting room, you can also sometimes place these at the bottom and use the existing hem from the original t-shirt. All right, for the collar and straps, I have cut that out of rib knit fabric. So that's the only fabric that I got that was not from the t-shirt. And I'm going to be placing that, matching up the centers to sew on. And you'll notice that the rib knit is slightly shorter than the actual tank top. That is by design. You're going to stretch it just a little bit to sew it on. You want to only stretch it until it lays flat against the fabric underneath. Same thing here on the front. And because this is a knit pattern, I need to use a stretch stitch. If you don't know how to sew stretch fabrics, I've got a video linked below that is actually a whole playlist on how to work with stretch fabrics. I'm going to use my serger to sew on the neck bindings. Now that I have my neck binding sewn on, I'm going to flip it to the wrong side up And then I want to fold the binding down so that it just covers the stitching line from before. And I am going to take this over to my cover stitch machine after I get it pinned in place and top stitch this binding down. And again, I'm having to stretch the rib knit just a little bit to get it to lay flat since it is shorter than the neckline. Once you have those neck bindings sewn on, then you just need to lay the front and the back right sides together and sew up the side seams. The next step after we do the side seams, which I also want to mention, you saw me using my serger and my cover stitch machine. You absolutely do not need those machines to do this. You can do this on a regular sewing machine, and that playlist about sewing knits that I linked in the description has information on how to do that. So once those side seams are sewn up, we are going to be applying the straps. And let me show you what this looks like. So first, you need to take the straps and you need to sew one short edge so that you've got a loop. Then you're going to do some pressing, which is going to be helpful. So you want to press your strap in half first with those two raw edges lined up. And then you want to open it back up and press both of those raw edges towards the middle and fold the whole thing in half. So here's the width of my completed strap as it will look once it's sewn on. And I've got it all entirely raw edges inside. There's also a marking on the pattern piece that you want to make sure to transfer. Got it marked here in chalk that you can see. That is where the front and the back of the arm side are going to hit. So you want to make sure you have those markings on there. So what I'm going to do is unfold my strap and I'm going to turn my tank right side out. And then I want to line up the seam on my strap with the seam on my tank. I'm going to match those up together, and I'm going to use pins because you absolutely cannot do this step with a serger. It's going to create issues for the finish. So I want to line up my mark with the edge of my tank in the front and the other mark with the edge of my tank in the back. And by the way, if you prefer an adjustable strap on your tank top, I have a different video on how to do that, and I've also linked that in the description. So I do have to stretch my rib knit just a little bit to get it to lay flat against the tank. And then what I want to do is take this over to the sewing machine. I want to sew in that first crease closest to the raw edge with a stretch stitch. A narrow zigzag stitch would work well here, or I'm going to be using my lightning bolt stretch stitch on my machine. And I want to repeat that on the other side as well. All right, y'all, once you have that strap loop sewn on with the first pass, then what you want to do is just refold it on the lines that you pressed in before we stitch. So all of those raw edges are enclosed in the strap area. And that should cover the stitching line from the step we just completed as well. Then in the area that is not attached to the tank, you just want to make sure those edges are folded in. You might want to add a pin or two to keep them from unfolding. And then you are going to use a zigzag stitch or a twin needle or a cover stitch, whatever kind of hem or top stitching type of stretch stitch that you want to use, and you're going to stitch all around that loop. That's going to keep this from unfolding, and it is going to secure all those raw edges inside. You do want your needles to be closest to this outer edge where it's the two folds to keep the strap intact. So once you have that done, here is what it would look like. You can see how my strap no longer unfolds, and I used my cover stitch machine, but again, there are lots of options for how to do that finish there, including just a regular zigzag stitch. Once that is all done, all you need to do is fold up a hem on the bottom of the tank, and you're going to use a hem stitch to stitch that in, and then you're done. All right, once you have finished both of the straps and hemmed the tank, this is what it looks like, and now it is all ready for me to wear. If you enjoyed that project and would like to check out a few more using my patterns, I've made a playlist for you here and you can take a look.